Hello there! I want to thank you for taking a little time out of your day to spend with me for a few minutes while I talk about a few subjects. This is going to be the first of hopefully many weekly broadcasts, which I'm going to broadcast live on Facebook sometime on Sunday afternoon and then upload to YouTube later so you can check it out in either place. So you should subscribe to my YouTube channel and follow me here on Facebook so that you can definitely know when it is that I'm going to be broadcasting these videos. So today we're going to talk about the true will, and I'm going to answer some questions that have come in, and I'm going to do a tarot reading for someone who's asked for a tarot reading. So go ahead and stay around till the end. Now, the interesting thing about the tarot reading is that I've noticed that when I do these sorts of broadcasts, although very, very often I'm directing a tarot reading at somebody, other people find that it's actually meaningful for them as well, because we're going to talk in mostly archetypal terms, and so that you may find that even if you've just had a question in your mind, the tarot reading actually applies to it in some way. It's nice. I'm seeing a lot of people coming on here and checking this out, so I hope that you'll stick with it to the end. Now, one thing that you may not know, a lot of you don't, is that I've actually been doing regular video broadcasts for quite some time. Over a year now, I've been making videos almost every day, and sometimes multiple videos a day. I've been running a bunch of different secret courses here on Facebook. I've got one on my new Hermetics system. I've got one on something called the 60-Day Adepthood Challenge. Both of those courses amount to over 300 videos at this point. I also, with some other teachers, have taught a class on Goetia and a class on Enochian. All of those things are here secretly hidden on Facebook, but I decided that I wanted to do a more public video presentation as well, so that people can get to know me who don't necessarily know anything about me. So today's subject is going to be about the true will and following one's true will and discovering one's true will and what that means. And I've received a bunch of questions, and I hopefully you guys can ask questions during the video if you want to. I may or may not be able to read them because I'm broadcasting from a portable device, so I don't know if I'm going to be able to see the questions that well. But I can answer them next week if I can't answer them right now. And if you have questions about other subjects, please feel free to ask them. I received a bunch of questions this week, and I'm only going to answer maybe half or less of them. And I've got a few questions that I've received in the past that I was intending to answer, but I don't want to talk for hours and hours and hours. So I'm going to try and keep it down to a certain number of questions, and then we'll move on. But first of all, let's talk about the true will for a second. What does it mean to discover one's true will and to be doing one's true will in the world? Well, first of all, I think there's more than one definition of true will, even within the context of metaphysics. There's the true will that moves upward, directing us towards our own source, towards our divine consciousness, towards our holy guardian angel, or whatever term we'd like to call it. But then there's also the just got a little brief break in my broadcast there for a second. Hopefully it is still connected now. The concept of the true will is often associated with Aleister Crowley, largely because he created a metaphysical system that he called Thelema, which means will, and so the idea of the true will is a term that he coined for doing one's will properly in the universe. However, the real concept of it really goes back, much further than that, and probably to the very first human beings, and it really has to do with doing our purpose, our reason for coming into the world, our destiny, our calling in life. That is a valid part of the true will, and one that has nothing to do with Aleister Crowley or Thelema. It's just simply the way that human beings operate. We come in with a sort of direction that we are meant to go, and when we do that, we are doing our true will, and when we do not, we are not. Now, a lot of people make this a lot harder than it needs to be. It's actually really more about knowing oneself, knowing one's nature, and just doing those things. I wanted to share a quote To show how far this concept goes back, I wanted to share a quote from Plato's Republic. In the 10th chapter, a story is told about this man named who was in a great battle, and he actually was thrown into the, with all the people that died, he was thrown into the pile of bodies. But 10 days later, he actually woke up, and he told everyone that he was told to tell the world about what happens after death. And so a number of things happen. There are some good souls go in different directions, and bad souls go in other directions, and some souls end up coming back and going round through the thing again, and some souls either are trapped in the bad punishment place, and some end up in the higher place and don't come back. But the majority of people kind of cycle through. It's very similar to reincarnation stories that you see in the East. However, what's interesting about it is that at a certain point he is led through the process of reincarnation, even though he isn't actually going to reincarnate himself. And basically, they go through the solar system and the planetary spheres and come down, and they're about to come to Earth. And then they're brought to this place where they are going to be given their destiny, their life plan. And basically they're told that they're going to have to draw lots for who gets to choose their life first, and that's sort of random. But then once that happens, they get to choose which life amongst those that are available they would like to lead. And it says, announcer, the speaker says, "Mortal souls, behold a new cycle of life and mortality. Your daemon will not be allotted to you, but you choose the daemon of your destiny. And let him who draws the first lot have the first choice, and the life which he chooses shall be his destiny." So, I mean, this is obviously a metaphor. It's a story within a story in Plato's Republic. But the idea is that we are coming into the world with a conscious choice of what it is that we want to accomplish in life. Now, further in this story, everyone on their way back down to incarnation drinks from the draft of confusion and forgetfulness, and so forgets their purpose. And then the daemon is that spirit, that spiritual essence that guides us forward in our life towards where our destiny is meant to go. And this really is a perfectly good metaphor for the true will. I also want to introduce you guys to a diagram that probably not all that many of you are familiar with, although it's quite old. It's from the work of a psychiatrist from the early 20th century, a contemporary of Freud and Jung and Reich and all that crowd. His name was Roberto Assagioli, and he was an Italian psychiatrist, and what was and he created something called psychosynthesis. And what's interesting about his work is that he, amongst all of them, is the most oriented towards the full consciousness, including metaphysical consciousness and higher consciousness and even paranormal experiences and so forth. He really focuses on the whole person, and so his diagram represents a somewhat metaphysical person. Now, keep in mind that this picture is a model. It's not a map. It's not intended to be a physiological diagram of anything. It's just simply a model of looking at things. So don't get too caught up in this being what a person actually looks like from a metaphysical level or anything like that. But this is an interesting model of consciousness. And so I'm actually going to start up here with this little star. This represents the sort of the higher self, the divine self, the daemon, the center, the true self, the true core of a person, the direction that they're supposed to go in life. And down here in the middle is what we call the ego, or the lower self, or the point of awareness. And it includes this small circle. These are all this small circle represents the things that are sort of in your field of awareness, in your normal consciousness. Like I'm in this room looking around at all my books and whatnot, and this is my normal field of awareness. This larger egg represents those things that are unconscious, and then the whole field, the paper, and then infinitely beyond the paper, represents the entirety of consciousness itself, seen as a continuum that we are all participating in. This part here is our sort of individual notions about ourselves, but it ultimately takes place within the field of a huge consciousness. And as you can see, everything's done with dotted lines, meaning that none of these things, even though they are sort of delineated from each other, none of them are meant to be hard and fast breaks from each other. Rather, they are areas, they're generally areas where things are, but stuff will move back and forth freely. So, in other words, if we conjure a spirit or something like that, it's going to be from out here, but it's going to permeate into our consciousness and be a part of our consciousness in some way, and we only see it through the lens of whatever our consciousness can manage. So then there's these three areas in here. This is the lower unconscious, and this represents things like the negative states that we have that limit us, that bring us, basically, if we use that real simplistic kind of idea that there's fear and there's love. This is the areas that deals with fear, and this is the area that deals with love, and then this is the area sort of that's the middle ground in between those two things. So this area holds our complexes and our lower the desires of our body and stuff like that are more drawn towards self and selfishness, and this area is the parts of consciousness that are more universal and that bring us towards sharing and being a part of other people's, or the whole universe's economy, rather than just getting stuff for ourselves. And then this area is just sort of like those things that we can safely, become conscious of in our unconscious. And both of these areas tend to be areas that are somewhat disowned in all of us. And as you can see, the true self, the true will, so to speak, is way up here on the outer edge of this higher consciousness. So it's and this really explains a lot of what the metaphysics are that you need to go through in order to sort of discover your true will, and why it is that you need to do yoga and magic and those sorts of things to even get to this, which should be somewhat self-evident. So taking a step back from that, the true will really has to do with nature. It has to do with our place in the universe and how we function forward. And if we look at other parts of nature, we can see metaphorically how they are doing their true will, and that they do not deviate from their true will no matter what, whereas we humans tend to get a little bit lost sometimes. An acorn is always going to grow into an oak tree. It never grows into a sunflower, and a sunflower seed never grows into an oak tree. Those things know their true will, and as long as they're given the right conditions, fertile soil and so forth, they're always going to achieve their true will and accomplish what it is that they're supposed to accomplish. Likewise, animals are very much, they do their thing. And now it is fun for us as humans to make metaphors about these animals and plants and so forth, and imagine that they could try to do something new, and because as humans we often like the idea of being flexible and being able to do more what we'd like to do rather than what we're geared towards. And as humans, we are ultimately more flexible, and often are grown into a ground that, while not necessarily fertile for doing what it is that we're meant to do, can actually help us to move forward. For instance, there are many stories of people who have become very successful in the arts or business who grew up in very poor families in which that sort of stuff was not encouraged at all. But for them, for their particular incarnation, that negative pressure actually helped them to move forward in a more dramatic way. For other people, they feel just the opposite. They are not, they're born into a place where they aren't encouraged, and instead it breaks them down rather than giving them strength to move forward. Every person is going to have their own kind of experience of what the factors are, but the true will remains the same. It's what you are meant to do. And a lot of people feel like they don't know what they're meant to do, but this is really a matter of just not being honest with oneself about what it is that you're really interested in. The trouble that we get into as a species is that we often have these addictions and compulsions and things that are given to us by the environment, like, for instance, if we're raised in a family in which every person for generation after generation has become an engineer or a doctor or something like that, and the pressure from the family is to continue that pattern. If you feel kind of like you're more of a painter, that's going to be a hard situation to get to launch out of, and to make have a different kind of a life from that, because you're part of a larger pattern. But as humans, we do have the ability to make those choices. We're slightly different from other species and other things. Like, for instance, if you take a cup of water and you put it in the freezer, it's never going to become ice cream unless you add other things to it. It's always just going to become ice. So we have a less automatic function than most of the, and that's our blessing as well as our curse. So when we talk about these metaphors, we're basically saying that the true will is nothing other than just following the course of nature, and that is true. But as I said, humans are a little bit more complicated in the way that they approach their nature than other beings, and so we can run into complications. What I think one of the great difficulties that a lot of people has when it comes to the true will is that they think that the true will is something very different than who they are presently, that there's something that they need to seek out that's beyond who they are right now. And I think Aleister Crowley's writings in some places do make that seem like it's the case. But the truth is, he was operating from a position in his upbringing in which he was a very different person than the environment that he was in, and so he had to rebel significantly from who he is. That's not going to be the case for everybody. The vast majority of people are actually going to be aligned with where they want to be going, and it's just simply a matter of going there and doing it. Now, the thing about the true will is that it is going to be, as expressed outward in the universe, it is going to be much more powerful than what you may imagine that you're capable of right now. Your true will is the ultimate of what you can accomplish. In other words, if you're a piano player, you can, play in bars or record stuff and put it up on YouTube. But your true will as a piano player is to be the very best piano player that you can possibly be, which is to be the very best piano player in the world. The same is true for business. Your true will is to be as great as you can. Just as an acorn planted in the ground, it doesn't want to become a crappy oak tree. It wants to become the absolute greatest oak tree that it could possibly be. The largest and the oak tree that produces the most additional acorns that could ever be. If conditions are right for it, then that will happen. If conditions are not right, then it won't happen. And that is true of you and your true will as well. It is possible that your true will is to become the greatest piano player in the world, but you will only ever become a decent piano player. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't strive to become the greatest piano player that you can, or whatever it is that you want to do. I'm not encouraging you to quit what you're doing and becoming a piano player. It's a tough life. A lot of people think that there's a statement in Crowley's writings that once a person has discovered their true will, they have the whole backing of the universe behind them, and so they're going to be able to accomplish it. Because once they've found their true steps in life, then they're part of the universal economy, and they're gonna move forward. Well, there's a lot of things about that. I agree with the statement, but there's a lot of things about it that I think are a little bit confusing. First of all, the universe is never against you. There's no part of the universe that is for or against you. The universe is simply just moving forward, and you are a part of it or you are not. There's no way that the universe is trying to oppose you or trip you up or make things hard for you. Any problems or challenges that you have are largely of your own doing, or are because of the nature of where you're going, and don't necessarily mean that you're on the wrong path. Most people who try and accomplish things run into huge amounts of problems on the way to getting there. But the thing is that inside themselves, they know that that's the direction that they have to go. This is true of all genius, which ultimately the true will, if we think about it, if the true will has to do with our holy guardian angel, which is just really Aleister Crowley's word for the genius, the daemon, the destiny that we have, if we are following our true will, then we are acting as a genius. And all geniuses in this world face opposition. there's no time when someone does something amazing that there aren't people to say that doesn't fit with what I'd like it to be, and so we're going to resist you. The challenge is to know yourself well enough that you are not doing something that isn't your true will and thinking that the universe is just testing me. And this is where people get confused. But it couldn't really be simpler. It's simply being who you actually are. Okay, so here's the challenge, and that's why I want to go back to this diagram. Your awareness is here. Your true direction is here. And you've got all this unconscious stuff in between. And what's there? What's there is, okay, the lower stuff is going to be really the stuff that's the challenge because it's pulling you down. Now, I want to be clear. The lower stuff does not necessarily mean lower in a value judgment, but rather the tightening stuff, the stuff that binds you to itself, the stuff that brings you down and takes you away from a more free-flowing state. Samadhi, union, is really that flow state in which you are operating in such a way that your consciousness is just propelling you forward and nothing is opposing it and everything is moving forward. The stuff down here is the stuff that pulls you in a different direction. This is your addictions. This is whether that is if for instance, if it's more important for you to go get a bottle of liquor than it is for you to accomplish the thing that you want to accomplish, then that liquor is pulling you down. If it's more important for you to impress people than it is for you to do the thing that you feel you're meant to do, that's pulling you down in here. If it's more important for you to show your neighbors how righteous you are, or how enlightened you are, or how important you are, that's all pulling you down. That is all the stuff that keeps you from this spot up here, that true essence of who you are. Okay, and so even up here, you can really get into problems if you start feeling like you are, you're so loving and so enlightened and so precious with your amazing energy that you are caught up in this area of the unconscious, the more loving and open one. You can get just as lost up here as you can down here. So the true will is freeing yourself from all this stuff, all these complexes inside you that are wanting your energy. And once you pull out of that energy, then this ascent up to your true will is almost automatic. It doesn't require a huge amount of work. It's more just like looking at yourself and saying, "Hey, that's who I am. I'm not, what their opinion is not important to me anymore." The idea that it's a calling, a specific calling, is also, I think, a little bit of a blurring of the truth of this. I've used this as a metaphor through this talk, and Crowley uses it a lot, and a lot of other people use it as well. That discovering that you're supposed to be this or that. That ultimately can just be another label that keeps you down in here. I'm a painter, so I can't do X, Y, or Z. It's the truth is what you're wanting to do is to connect with source. And source means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, but ultimately it's the same thing. It's connecting with reality. It's connecting with the truth of your consciousness, unimpaired by other stuff coming in. The truth of who you are as consciousness, as awareness, as life. And allowing that to flow through you in the best way that it can. And once you do that, when you put yourself in that place, vocation and calling and stuff like that, those are less relevant than just being. Being is the real essence of it all, and expressing that being in a way that lights up the world and that brings your particular color of light to the world in a beautiful way, and that will become calling, but it's not necessarily just about that. It's much more about just being. There are a lot of in Crowley's writings and in other writings, but that come largely out of his writings. We see the word subconscious being utilized as what the HGA is, or what the where the true will is, and I think that is misleading, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that the terms for psychology were a little less cemented than they are today when he was writing. And so when he's talking about the subconscious, he's really just talking about those things that are outside of your awareness. He is really talking about this whole field here. Whereas when we talk about the subconscious today, most of the time we're talking about down here, or maybe like in this area here. But certainly we're not talking about up here. Whereas he was including that everything that was outside of your awareness is your subconscious. And you can actually see that in a lot of literature from that time period. I prefer the word the unconscious in general, and then superconscious for this area up here. But you're not going to see those words in a lot of other writings. But it's important to realize that when Crowley speaks of the subconscious, and as the HGA is your subconscious acting through you, he's not saying that your lower animal instincts are your holy guardian angel. He's simply saying that which is outside of your normal awareness and outside of what you know that you are is really what is guiding you forward, and that's the important thing. And when you start to connect with that stuff, you're going to connect with all the negative complexes that are going on inside you, and you're also going to connect with all the loving and pleasant things, and you have to integrate all of that and sort of evolve past it to get to where your true essence really is. Finally, I want to talk for a second about the HGA, the Holy Guardian Angel, which is intimately connected with this true will concept, as a separate being from oneself, which in Crowley's writings up until, say, the early 1920s, he really doesn't refer to it that way. It's only later that he starts calling Aiwass his holy guardian angel and considering that to be an entity very separate from himself. Before that time period, he really is considering it, and it's very clear, he's considering it to be the next step in human evolution, becoming aware of our genius, becoming aware of who we are, and there's a number of different ways of interpreting his change in stance. One of them may be that he was so disconnected from that truth of himself that he needed to have it seem like it was an entirely separate energy. But we also can interpret it any number of other ways as well. So I'm not. If it's important for you that your holy guardian angel be an imaginary friend that you can talk to, it's going to come to you that way, and you can have that interaction with it if you want to. But realizing that the truth of it is that you're going to be moving towards your essence and towards your true self, and that is really what the holy guardian angel is. I think that's ultimately a more helpful place to place your attention. It's There are a number of occultists out there today who have their holy guardian angel as a buddy that they give offerings to, and that they that they see as an entity entirely separately from themselves, and that's totally cool. I don't personally think that that's all that helpful in terms of you growing as a being into that sort of higher dimensional self. But that's everyone gets to choose the way that they go through life, and that's part of what the true will is ultimately. So I'm going to move on to some questions that I've been asked about this subject, and a couple other subjects too here. So this one kind of gets right to the core of things. The person asks, how can you know the true will if your awareness isn't permanently seated in Tiferet? And so, how does one who hasn't even moved through the 30-second path live their true will? Do we just ask/pray for as much insight as we're able to handle about our true will, and then just follow our inclinations? Okay, so this is a very complex question. I want to define a couple terms. First of all, the awareness permanently seated in Tifereth, that's referencing the idea of moving up the tree of life, and Tifereth is the central point in the tree of life, which is often associated with adepthood, and through adepthood connecting with one's holy guardian angel or divine genius, as the Golden Dawn called it. And the 32nd path is the path that connects Malkuth with Yesod, which is the first path that you traverse on the Tree of Life when you're beginning that process of moving into higher states of consciousness. Those are sort of Kabbalistic terms that come from the Golden Dawn's way of approaching the Tree of Life in Kabbalah. That isn't necessarily the way that Jewish mystics would approach it at all, any of that stuff, but that is the way that we approach it in our Hermetic, Kabbalistic way of approaching things. Now, another question I just noticed come through here as I'm talking, someone asked if the HGA equals the higher self. I mean, both of those terms are just word slush unless they point to something specific. They are fingers pointing at the moon, neither of them are the moon. Depending on what you mean by the higher self, yes, it is. Where people can go wrong is they can think, this area here in our awareness is all of our good intentions, all of our sweetness, all of our light, all of our happy thoughts, all of our desire to connect with others. And this area is often called the higher self by people, but that area is not the holy guardian angel. The holy guardian angel is beyond that, where we get to the actual central essence of our incarnation, of our consciousness flowing into the world. I hope that explains that. And so Crowley says the holy guardian angel is not your, all the best parts of yourself. It's here, right? Okay. So hopefully that somewhat helps with that understanding. But if you think of the higher self as being the true self, the true essence of the true core of your being as an individual incarnate essence, then yes, it is the higher self. So back to this person's question. Do we just ask for, or pray for as much insight as we're able to handle about our true will, and then just follow our inclinations? Here's the problem with that. If you're just following your inclinations, very often those inclinations come from down here. So one has to be a little cautious. Our inclinations can say, because we can say, maybe it would be really useful for me to, instead of stopping drinking and starting to work on my poetry that I've been intending to, that I actually explore how much I could possibly drink without dying. That would be and that could teach me about my will. If I did that, well, chances are that's just this area down here calling to you and pulling you towards your own destruction. So following your inclinations, following the whatever pops into your head is not necessarily the smartest thing to do. At the same time, your true will is going to be an inclination within there. Okay, so the map for that is really pretty simple right here. When things are moving you more upwards towards a more open and free state of consciousness, you're moving more towards your true will. When they're pulling you down towards a more restricted, more angry, more constricted place, that is, you're moving away from your true will. Okay, but here's the thing, and this is one of Crowley's real innovations in this stuff, is that your freedom doesn't necessarily mean becoming a better Christian or going to church or any of those things. That isn't necessarily the correct path, nor does, being a good Christian can often land you down in here because you're hanging out outside of abortion clinics and yelling at people rather than, loving them and being, and trying to help in some way with making the world a better place so that there don't have to be abortion clinics or things like that, because people aren't, doing things that they aren't thinking about and, taking unconscious actions that end them up in situations in which they have to utilize, abortion as contraception. And people aren't going out and raping each other, or pushing, whatever. I'm not going to get into a whole big philosophical thing here, but at any rate, it is possible to think that you're being a righteous person and actually be operating from down here, and it's possible to be quite a dastardly and adventurous into areas that aren't necessarily approved by society, and be operating up here. It's all about where you're coming from and how you're doing it. If you're feeling more angry and more restricted and more like that person's different from me and I need to get away from them, you're operating more from down here. If you're feeling like I need to do this or I'm going to lose my mind, then you're operating more from down here. If you're coming from like, everything is lightening up, and I'm moving into new areas, and things are bringing new possibilities into the universe and through me into the, I'm open to all the possibilities of the universe. Then you're moving upwards. So how can you know your true will if your awareness isn't permanently seated in Tiferet? You can know your true will. Can you be operating in your true will if you aren't operating out of here? Can you be operating your true will? No, and that's that's the whole point. Now, finding your true will isn't necessarily following the practices of the Golden Dawn or the AA or something like that. It can simply just be knowing who you are and doing it, and integrating and getting out of the unconscious structures that are in here. It isn't necessarily an occult practice at all. There's lots of people who are doing their true will, who are connected with their divine genius, who aren't occultists. In fact, I would say the majority of people who are operating out of their divine genius are not occultists. Now, that doesn't mean that they have things. The advantage the occultist has is that they're going to solve a lot of these things. They're going to remove a lot of these compulsions, and so they aren't going to end up in the struggles that we see so many geniuses having. If you can integrate this whole thing, then you can have the benefits of genius and not have the need to commit suicide by hanging, or drug addiction or all those sorts of things. Because you can, without having achieved this experience and living in this spot, connect with it periodically and bring stuff down and have stuff come through you into your consciousness. But that doesn't mean that you're not going to be trapped in all this stuff as well. So that's the thing about the reason to go to seek out that higher consciousness and to try and cleanse yourself of the addictions and the problems that you have in your life, is so that you can be a fully integrated human and do things in a way that is going to empower you and also make the world a better place, and also allow you to lead a life that is balanced and one that is filled with joy and not compulsion. So how can you lead your true will without having done your that's one part of his question, without having done the inner work? Yes, but it's going to be with a significant amount more trouble and conflict along the way. Internal, as well as external. But there's always external. The thing that you can control is your reaction to it and your internal space. Next question. I would like to know which parts of the new Hermetics deal with the true will and how to find the true will within your system. Now, what's interesting about this guy is that after that question, he then almost answers it by saying, strange how the goals I set during the course, which is my online course of the new Hermetics, come to manifestation. Sometimes it's nothing spectacular, but simply changing simple things in everyday life. So basically what he's saying is that he wants to know which parts of the New Hermetics material and the New Hermetics course deal with finding and accomplishing one's true will, and then he says, "But I've set all these goals, and they've all come about." So the answer to that is that largely it is setting goals that helps us to discover and to accomplish our true will, which is the very first practice in the New Hermetics, and the one that most people don't want to do. I can't even tell you how many people have taken my course and either they say, oh no, I'm too spiritual, I don't like to set goals, that's something from business or something. I'm not interested in that. Or they just are like, I don't know how to set a goal. I don't know, or I just don't know I don't know what I want. So here's the thing. In setting a goal for yourself, you are not necessarily going to accomplish that goal because it may be too much for you. Or it may be that it's a goal that you don't really want, and it's only something that you think that you want, that your dad told you needed to do, or that the environment that you grew up in suggested was the right thing to do. So when you set that goal, and when I have people set goals, I have them set specific goals with specific numbers and stuff, so that they really know what it is that they're going after. And I tell them to create actions towards that goal and to take those actions, small actions. If it's a big goal, it doesn't have to be, to accomplish the goal. It'll just be a little step towards it. Like, say you wanted to, let's take a silly goal, which a lot of people set, that they wanted some sort of fancy sports car. Well, the first direction towards that goal is to get a catalog that shows the features of that. That's your first step. That's all you have to do. That's one step in that direction. Now, here's the thing: if you then take no more further actions toward that goal, nothing. You don't get a better job so you can afford it. Nothing else. It's not really something that you want. It's something that you think that you want. If it's something that you actually want, if it's something that is important to you, by setting the goal and by taking a few small actions towards it, you're going to set in motion forces that are going to continue you forward, and you're going to start finding different ways in which that thing is going to come into manifestation. Some of them metaphysical, some of them physical, and you're going to eventually find yourself sitting with that goal having been accomplished. And at that point, you then, once you've accomplished that goal, you then can look back on it and say, this was my true will to have this. Or you can look back on it and you can say, yeah, I guess I really didn't need to have this stupid sports car. That was dumb. I wasted a lot of energy on it. And then you can start moving towards where you really need to be going. So, in other words, by setting goals, they become a mirror that you can look at your consciousness with and then discover what is actually your true direction that you want to go in life, and what is not your true direction, and just things that seem like they would be nice. I very much, I very often have people set quite large goals for themselves that are, well beyond where they are right now, and when I see that, I know that's not. It's a person who is not really thinking about goals at all. So if you are going to utilize goals as your as a way of kind of getting into the understanding of who you are as a person, set goals that are a little bit outside of where you want to be right now, but not so far that it's just it's just pie in the sky thinking. If you work at Starbucks and you're like, I want to have $6 million by this time next year. I mean, it's possible. That has definitely happened many, 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 many times in the history of the world. But if you don't know what that direction is that's going to get you there, it's kind of just you're just dangling two wires. They're not going to connect with each other. So, in terms of the true will, other things within the new Hermetic system that relate to it are all of the specific tools that deal with our inner consciousness, the dealing with our emotions, dealing with our beliefs, dealing with our passions, and ultimately connecting with our source. All of that deals very directly with the true will. For the same reason, you're looking at a reflection of where your consciousness is right now, and you're discovering which things feel right and which things feel wrong. And we all ultimately know where it is that we're going to go, what it is that we want to accomplish. The essence of ourselves is something that we can see, no matter how deluded we are. But we can very often pretend that we don't, and that's really the big issue. Is taking your awareness of who you are and stripping away those things that you're pretending are important to you or that are who you are. Getting rid of those things and moving on instead to the stuff that's really actually important to you. I'm noticing a lot of questions coming through, but they're slipping past me before I can even really look at them. So I apologize. I will collect them all and try and answer them next week or within the coming weeks. Thank you for asking them. Okay, so this is a question. I think I've kind of already answered it, but I'll do it anyway. I'm wondering if you could elaborate a little bit or provide a potential resource on why normal consciousness loses control over subconscious compulsions. I'm trying to get a better understanding of the mechanics of this scenario, and how do you develop a healthier relationship with your subconscious. So this person is asking about this area of consciousness and why it is that we get pulled into those things. Now, obviously, we can only really, it's a very broad question and one that probably has more than one answer. But the truth is that the reason that we get pulled into these is because those are where we are directing our attention and not in this direction. For instance, let me give an example. If you are, let's say you wanted to write a novel and you felt like that was the most important thing to you in the world, and that was exactly where you wanted to put your attention, but you had a lot of unhealthy habits like watching too much television and drinking soda that makes you have rushes and then you have to take naps and stuff like that. If writing that novel becomes a compelling enough direction for you to go, you're naturally going to self-correct away from those compulsions. But if you are caught in those compulsions and don't focus on your intention, you're going to just be pulled back into those again and again and again. There are tools, I have a few tools that can be utilized for consciously taking control of those things and redirecting them. And this is one of the reasons I created the new Hermetics, was because I wanted to have ways that people can do, we can create a huge, elaborate, magical ceremony for this sort of stuff, or we can sort of address it as it comes up and really just kind of grab at it. And I eventually created a bunch of recordings that relate to the stuff so that you can just pop in a recording and listen to it and do the exercise in a fairly easy way. Although you don't have to do that forever. Once you know the exercise pretty well, you don't have to utilize the recording at all. Although sometimes I like to use my own recordings. Like Aziz Ansari talks about when he went and visited Kanye West, and Kanye was listening to Kanye when he went and visited him, and he was like, "Are you listening to your own music?" And I often listen to my own meditation recordings, and I think about Aziz Ansari when I do so. So anyway, you can once you're clear on what it is that you want to accomplish, those compulsions have less pull. But when you're not clear on what it is that you want to accomplish, those compulsions have a lot of power over your body because they exist within your sort of body consciousness. And so they're going to continuously pull you down toward them. So clarity is really the key to getting past it. And you can easily redirect all those things towards the ends that you want them to, once you have clarity. If you don't have clarity, then there's no, you can go and talk to the part of you that wants to smoke cigarettes, and you can say, hey, let's stop smoking cigarettes. But if there isn't a reason, like, hey, we're planning to run a marathon, so this smoking cigarettes thing's got to go, it's going to be much harder. But if that vision of smoking cigarettes, of running the marathon is more compelling than the smoking cigarettes, the smoking cigarettes is going to go away. It's that simple. So you just have to discover your driving force and move through it. As far as making friends with your subconscious goes, if you're really at odds with your own consciousness, the important thing to do is to just simply do centering meditation and to really kind of come to understand who you are and what your subconscious is and what its messages are doing to you and what they mean. That's really the most important thing to do. And that's ultimately going to help you to find your sort of true direction and true will as a byproduct, even if you're just trying to control those subconscious urges. So it's all integrated. So I'm going to just do a couple more questions here. And then we'll get. I'm going to end this broadcast, and like I said, I'm going to take all these questions that are coming in. Oh, I've got to do a tarot reading too, and then next week I'll answer the rest of these questions that are coming up. This one says, it's great to hear about your initiative for your YouTube channel. I actually have a question that I've been pondering these last few weeks. I'm seeing a Jungian therapist right now, and I'm finding Jung's archetypes, the anima, the shadow, the child, the wise old man, and so on, and the practice of active imagination quite useful. I think it would be interesting to discuss how these tie in with Kabbalistic magic concepts and practices, and if they can be used in conjunction to help solve personal issues. For instance, when balancing the elements, which is one of my exercises. Okay, so this is an interesting question that and relates to our topic tangentially. In essence, I think that really they are an integral component of our Western Hermetic tradition. And in fact, if we look at the tarot cards, which I'm about to do a reading with, then we can see, okay, so we've got the anima. Well, I mean, here's an image that depicts the anima right here, the world. And then here we have the anima and the animus depicted in the card The Lovers. The shadow. I mean, I think there's a couple of cards that could be the shadow, but certainly the devil jumps to mind as being very related. The wise old man, well, here's the wise old man. And then the child, here's the child. So, I mean, the tarot as an archetypal source really is such a powerful way of approaching both Jungian active imagination and the process of sort of self discovery and self integration. And in fact, my new Hermetics materials, they actually contain an exercise in which you go through all of the 22 trumps of the tarot, major arcana of the tarot, and have an active imagination experience with each of them as a way of kind of understanding your own relationship with these archetypes and how you can more easily interact with them on a subjective level, but also how they are in your own consciousness and ways in which you may need to sort of work on or heal those relationships or those archetypes in general as they are in your consciousness. So within my work, those Jungian archetypes are fairly important. Other aspects of occultism, I think, equally deal with them, although very often they don't look at them in quite that same way. So I don't know if that completely answers the question, but hopefully it at least gives you a window into my thinking on the subject. So I'm going to jump to doing my tarot reading, and I want to just... I got a lot more questions than the ones that I've answered so far, and like I said, I will try and answer them next week. A lot of the questions had to do with like products and stuff like that, and I want to answer those questions, and I'm absolutely going to answer them. But I wanted to just not have this go on forever and ever and ever. So next week I'll deal with those things, and then whatever questions are up here, and we will talk again then. So I'm mixing up my tarot cards here. Hopefully we won't end up with those ones that I just pulled out of the deck all right next to each other, because that would be a rather disappointing reading. Okay. So I like to do a 5-card tarot reading at this point. It's pretty much the one that I do 90% of the time now. And so the first card represents the past. The second card represents the present. The third card represents the future. The card that is above, which I place on top of the other cards, represents those things that are crowning the person, those things that are coming in from... We can go back to our diagram. Those things that are coming from up here that are guiding us forward, and the card that is below represents those things that are down here that are either disowned or that are a negative complex that needs to be worked on. So this is a rather a reading that I less like to see, because we see cards that are moving more in a less positive, a less favorable thing, at least in the immediate future. So this is the message that I want to give to the person who asked for this reading. The first card is the Page of Cups. That represents the past. So the page represents the first initial, or the princess represents the first initial outpouring of that on a personal level. The cups represent the emotion. So this is something that you're very emotionally attached to. You're coming from an emotional place, but it may not be a place in which you're like fully as in control of the situation as you'd like to be. The position that you're in now, the present position, is the Six of Wands. So and the Six of Wands represents success. It represents accomplishment. It represents victory. As you can see in this particular version, he's wearing a laurel crown, and he's got a laurel wreath on his wand. The wands have to do with the will, with the element of fire, and so there's a strong forward momentum going on to accomplish the things that you want to accomplish. So you're going from a place of sort of like a little bit of a naive emotional space into a place in which there's an initial victory. So I would expect, if you haven't already had that strong sense of success, it is about to happen. You're going to feel very accomplished, and you're going to feel like things are moving in the right direction. And in fact, the card that's above you is actually the Ten of Cups, which represents success on all planes. It's a very positive card, representing that just everything is kind of, you're being guided towards everything is coming together for you, at least at this time. However, the card that's in the future is the Five of Pentacles, and that's typically a card that represents a lack of resources, a sense that you're not quite able to do the things that you want to do. So and then down below we see the Star. Now the Star, on a metaphysical level, that represents kind of opening up and trusting the universe, and trusting, if we go back to our diagram, sort of trusting in this in this area here to guide us forward, and allowing that to unfold through us. However, down in that below position, it would seem to indicate that you're not trusting that energy as much. So the essence of the message that I think here is that you're moving into a place right now where where everything's kind of coming together for you in a way, but not in a permanent or solid sense. And in fact, there's still sort of a trial to go through before you get to the place where you really are going to be experiencing the greatest success that you're hoping for in this situation, which, as I said, the Ten of Cups up above indicates the universe is trying to guide you towards it. So the important thing for you to do is not block those messages from the universe, not allow yourself to be sort of thwarted by your own lack of self-insight from taking the actions that are necessary, and from realizing that just because things seem a little bit scarce right now, that there's, once you get past that desert, there is the oasis of where you're going to be accomplishing and feeling success in these things. So hopefully that's been helpful, and with that, I'm going to end this broadcast. If anyone else would like a reading, I think I saw someone mentioning that they would like a reading at some point. I will if you have a specific question, you can go ahead and ask me, or if you just want a general reading, that's fine. But just go ahead and either send me a message or send me an email at jason@newhermetics.com, and I will be sure to include it in the next session that we have. Send me where you're located in the world, or your first initials or something like that, so that I can identify you without identifying you while we do the reading. Since there was only one, it was unnecessary to do that today. But go ahead and send any questions you'd like, as I said, to jason@newhermetics.com, or to Messenger on Facebook if you are connected with me that way. And we will talk next week. Thank you.